Seraphina hadn't spoken in 17 years, not since the night she'd watched her parents die, not since she'd tried to scream for help and no one had come. The silence had started as trauma and become her shield, her protection, her way of disappearing into the background where no one looked too closely, which was exactly what she needed now. She crouched in the shadows of the great hall, scrubbing the stone floor with practiced efficiency, while Alpha Ronan's voice echoed above her. Most of the servants had been dismissed for the evening, but Seraphina, silent, unobtrusive Seraphina, was easy to forget. She'd learned to be invisible, learned that being overlooked meant being safe. Tonight, being overlooked meant discovering something that could get her killed. "The festival," Ronan was saying, his voice low but carrying in the empty hall. 3 weeks, that's when we strike." Seraphina's hand stilled on the brush, but she kept her head down, kept scrubbing. Don't react, don't draw attention. Just listen. 50 rogues should be sufficient. That was a voice Seraphina didn't recognize. Rougher, cruer. The listening king always brings minimal guard to the peace festival. It's his weakness, that trust. The listening king, Alpha King Darius of the northern White Peaks. Seraphina had never met him, but everyone knew of him. They said he could hear what wasn't spoken, that he read truth in silence better than most read words on a page. They said his territory prospered because he actually listened to his people, even the quietest voices. They said he was fair, just everything Alpha Ronan wasn't. "Marcus," Ronan's voice held warning, "you're certain your rogues won't fail?" "Marcus, the blade doesn't fail," the rough voice replied. "Your gold buys my blades, Alpha, and my blades will end the listening king. Then in the chaos, your claim to his territory will be the strongest. Who's going to argue with the neighboring Alpha offering stability?" Seraphina felt ice run through her veins. An assassination during the peace festival in 3 weeks. She needed to warn someone. Needed to. But who? She was mute, a servant. Even if she tried to write it down, who would believe her? Ronan would simply deny it, and then she'd disappear. She'd seen servants who knew too much vanish before. And there was another problem. A secret she'd been keeping for 2 years, ever since her grandmother, the only family she had left, had died, and left her alone in the Silverwood pack. Seraphina was an Omega. Her grandmother had taught her to hide it, to use a mixture of herbs that suppressed her scent. "They'll force you into a political mating if they know," her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed. Or worse, "Stay hidden, little dove. Stay safe." So Seraphina had stayed hidden, had worked as a servant, had kept her head down, had survived. But if she tried to reveal this conspiracy, if she drew any attention to herself, someone might look too closely, might discover what she was, and then she'd be trapped, used as a pawn in Ronan's games, just like everything else. She needed to warn the listening king, but she needed to do it without revealing herself, without putting herself in Ronan's path, which meant she'd have to find another way. That night, Seraphina sat in her tiny room with her most precious possession, a leather-bound journal her mother had given her before she died. It was filled with Seraphina's drawings, sketches of everything she'd seen over the years, plants, animals, people, places. Drawing was how she spoke when she couldn't use words. It was how she processed the world, how she remembered, how she felt. Now, it might be how she saved a king's life. She sketched quickly, planning. The northern White Peaks bordered Silverwood territory to the north. If she could reach the border, could leave warnings where Darius's patrols would find them. It was dangerous if she was caught outside the Packlands at night. if rogues found her, if Ronan's wolves spotted her. But if she did nothing, a good king would die. And how many others would suffer under Ronan's expanded rule? Seraphina looked at her hands, small, pale, marked with scars from years of servant work. These hands had scrubbed floors, carried firewood, prepared meals. These hands had drawn countless pictures in silence. These hands would draw a warning that couldn't be ignored. The first night, Seraphina left at midnight when the pack house was quiet and the guard rotations were changing. She'd memorized the patterns over years of invisibility. She knew exactly when she could slip out unnoticed. The journey to the border took 3 hours on foot, traveling through winter forest in darkness. Seraphina's heart pounded the entire way, every sound making her freeze, every shadow a potential threat. But she'd grown up in these woods. Her father had been a tracker before he died. She knew how to move quietly, how to avoid detection. When she reached the border, marked by ancient stones carved with territorial symbols, Seraphina found a clearing where patrol paths intersected. Fresh wolf prints in the snow told her patrols passed through here regularly. Perfect. She knelt in the snow, pulled out a sturdy stick she'd sharpened for drawing, and began to sketch. The first warning was simple, a map of the festival grounds with clear markings of danger. She drew the main pavilion, the surrounding areas, and marked specific points with symbols of attack. Anyone who knew tactical warfare would understand immediately these were ambush positions. She worked quickly, her fingers going numb in the cold, her breath forming clouds in the frozen air. When she finished, she stepped back to examine her work. Even in the pale moonlight, the drawing was clear, detailed, unmistakable. Would it be enough? Would Darius's wolves find it? Would they understand? She'd have to trust that the listening king's reputation was deserved, that he'd hear this silent warning. Seraphina made the journey back to Silverwood, slipping into her room just as dawn began to break. Her body ached, her fingers were raw, but she'd done it. The first warning was placed. 6 more nights to go. Each night, Seraphina added more information, more pieces of the puzzle that any good strategist would need. Night 2. She drew exactly 50 wolves converging on the festival grounds. The number was critical. Fane needed to know the scope of the threat. Night 3. She drew Marcus the Blade's face from memory. She'd only seen him briefly, but her artist's eye had captured every detail. The scar across his jaw, the cruel set to his mouth, the dead look in his eyes. It was one of her most detailed portraits, and she included the symbols that marked him as a known rogue leader. Wanted posters in Silverwood bore similar images. Anyone in Darius's guard would recognize him. Night 4. She drew the Silverwood symbol being connected to the rogues. This was the most dangerous revelation. If anyone from Silverwood found these drawings, if they realized someone had betrayed Ronan's plan, but it had to be done. Fane needed to know who was behind the attack. Night 5. She drew the full moon marked with the exact date. Timing was everything. The attack was planned for the height of the festival, when guards would be relaxed and celebrating. Night 6. She drew detailed tactical positions where the rogues would strike first, how they'd split their forces, where they'd try to cut off retreat. Seraphina had heard enough of Ronan and Marcus's planning to understand their strategy. She translated it all into clear visual warfare. Night 7. She drew the escape routes Marcus planned to use, the fallback positions, the secondary meeting point, everything she'd overheard while scrubbing floors and being invisible. Each night, when she returned exhausted and frozen, she wondered if it was working. Were Fane's patrols finding the drawings? Were they taking them seriously? Or were they dismissing them as children's games or elaborate pranks? She had no way to know. All she could do was keep trying, keep adding information, and hope that somewhere out there, someone was listening to her silent plea. On the 8th morning, Serafina set out before dawn. She needed to complete one final drawing, the most important one. She drew himself surrounded by a protective shield with the clear message, "Protect him." It was risky going so soon after the previous night. Her body was exhausted, her fingers raw and bleeding from the cold and rough bark she used for drawing tools. But there were only 2 weeks left until the festival. Time was running out. She reached the clearing as the sky began to lighten. That strange time between night and dawn when the world held its breath. The snow was pristine, untouched except for her footprints and the patrol marks from previous days. Serafina knelt in her usual spot where all her previous drawings had been made and began to sketch. She'd never seen Darius in person, but his description was well known. They said he was tall, powerfully built, with platinum blonde hair that he wore long in the old way. They said his eyes were ice blue, sharp as winter sky. She drew him standing tall, regal, strong, and around him she drew a perfect circle, a shield, a barrier, a symbol of protection. She poured everything into this drawing, all her desperation, all her hope, all her silent prayer that this warning would be enough. Please, please understand. Please be safe. She was so focused on the drawing, so absorbed in getting every detail perfect that she didn't hear the footsteps in the snow, didn't realize she wasn't alone, until silence, absolute silence, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Serafina's hand froze mid-stroke. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head and saw them. 30 white wolves arranged in a perfect semicircle behind her. They were massive, clearly elite warriors, their white and silver fur gleaming in the dawn light. They stood in military formation, completely silent, not a single growl or movement. The silent guard, Darius's legendary elite, and in the center, one wolf that dwarfed all the others, pure white, with eyes the exact shade of ice blue she'd just been drawing. Those eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. The Alpha King himself, Serafina's first instinct was to run. But where? She was surrounded, outnumbered, and even at her fastest, she'd never outrun wolves, especially not elite warriors. So instead, she did something that probably seemed insane. She stood slowly, keeping her hands visible. She lifted her chin, met those ice blue eyes directly, and didn't look away. If she was going to die, she'd die with dignity. She'd die knowing she'd tried to save an innocent king from assassination. The great white wolf took a step forward, then another. The other wolves held position, but their leader approached until he was less than 10 ft away. Then he shifted. It was fluid, seamless, beautiful. One moment a massive white wolf, the next a man who matched Serafina's drawing so perfectly it made her dizzy. Tall, easily 6 and 192 FTO platinum blonde hair falling past his shoulders, ice blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was bare-chested despite the cold, his skin marked with scars that spoke of battles survived. He was the most striking man Serafina had ever seen, and he was staring at her like she was something precious and impossible. "You," he said, his voice deep and rough with something like wonder. "You're the artist." Serafina couldn't respond, couldn't speak, could only stand there, throat tight with 17 years of silence and hope. Her eyes said what her voice couldn't. Yes, I'm the one. Please believe me. Please." Fane's gaze moved from her face to the drawings in the snow. She watched him take in the latest image himself surrounded by a protective shield. Then his eyes moved to the other drawings she'd made over the past week, still visible in the untouched snow. The maps, the tactical positions, the portrait of Marcus, the symbols of betrayal. When his eyes returned to her, something had changed in them. Understanding and fury, not at her, but at what she'd revealed. "You can't speak," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Something in her posture, her silence, her expression had told him. Serafina shook her head. "But you can hear me?" She nodded. "These drawings, you've been coming here for a week, every night." He took a step closer, alone in the dark, risking your life to warn me about an assassination attempt. Another nod. Darius closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, they blazed with something fierce. "You're from Silverwood Pack." It wasn't a question, but Serafina nodded anyway. Her heart was racing now. Would he send her back? Would he think she was part of the trap? "If your alpha discovers you betrayed his plan," Fane's jaw clenched, "he'll kill you." Serafina made a slashing gesture across her throat. Yes, exactly. Something happened then. Something Serafina had heard about but never experienced. The air between them suddenly felt electric, charged, like lightning about to strike. The world seemed to narrow until there was only him, only those ice-blue eyes, only the feeling of being seen, truly seen for the first time in 17 years. The mate bond. She saw the moment Darius felt it too. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and he moved without thinking, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides, and taking her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the world exploded. The mate bond slammed into Serafina with physical force, making her gasp. It was warmth and safety and home and belonging all at once. It was every lonely year suddenly filled, every silent scream finally heard, every part of her that had been broken slowly starting to knit together. But it was more than that. Her drawings in the snow began to glow. Not just glow, they began to rise. The lines she'd drawn were lifting from the snow, becoming 3-dimensional translucent shapes of pure silver light. The map she'd created was now a floating, rotating model. The portrait of Marcus looked almost alive, every detail crystal clear, and the protective shield she'd drawn around Darius's image. It was real. A barrier of shimmering silver energy, solid as steel, beautiful as moonlight. The 30 wolves behind Darius shifted nervously, but held formation. Darius himself was staring at the manifestations with a mixture of awe and understanding. "Moon goddess," he breathed, "you're a soul artist." Serafina looked from her glowing drawings to Darius's face, shock written across her features. She'd had no idea, had never known her gift could do this. She'd just been drawing, just trying to communicate the only way she knew how. "Soul artists can create reality from art," Darius explained, his voice gentle despite the wonder in his eyes. "It's the rarest gift the goddess gives. I thought they were extinct. The last known soul artist died 200 years ago." He squeezed her hand carefully, and the drawings pulsed brighter. "Your gift awakened because of the mate bond, because you were trying to protect me with everything you had. Your art became real because your intention was pure." Serafina's mind was reeling. Mate bond, soul artist. Everything was happening too fast, too much. But Darius's hand in hers was an anchor, steady, solid, safe. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She couldn't tell him, couldn't speak, but she held up her other hand and traced letters in the air. "I-A." "Serafina," Darius repeated. and the way he said it like it was something precious made her chest ache. "I'm Darius, and you're my mate, my soul artist mate, who's been risking everything to save my life." He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her. "I won't let anything happen to you. You're under my protection now. Mine to guard, mine to cherish, mine to keep safe." One of the wolves behind them, a large silver female, shifted to human form. She was tall, powerfully built, with silver white hair braided back from a striking face. "Alpha," she said, her voice respectful but urgent. "We need to move, if Silverwood patrols find her here." "Winter's right," Darius said, though his eyes never left Seraphina's face. "We need to get you to my territory now. You can't go back to Silverwood. It's not safe." Seraphina's eyes went wide. Leave. Just like that, she had nothing. No belongings, no preparations, nothing but the clothes on her back and the herb pouch she used to hide her scent. As if reading her thoughts, Darius said, "We'll send someone for anything you need later. Right now, your safety is all that matters. Will you come with me? Will you trust me?" Seraphina looked at him, really looked at the honesty in his ice-blue eyes, at the protective stance of his body, at the way he held her hand like she was something breakable and precious. She thought of Silverwood, of Ronan's cruelty, of years spent invisible and silent and alone. She thought of these drawings she'd made, now glowing with silver light, because she'd wanted so desperately to protect this man she'd never met. And she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll come with you. Yes, I trust you." The smile that broke across Darius's face was like sunrise. "Winter shift. Seraphina will ride with you. Everyone else, Formation Delta, we're not taking chances." Within moments, Seraphina found herself being carefully lifted onto Winter's back. The silver wolf was large enough to carry her easily, and her fur was surprisingly warm. The other wolves formed a protective circle around them. 30 elite warriors moving as one with Fane at the point. As they began to run, Seraphina looked back at the clearing. Her glowing drawings were already fading, returning to simple lines in snow. But the message had been received. The warning had been heard. For the first time in 17 years, Seraphina felt like her voice, even silent, had actually mattered. The northern white peaks was unlike anything Seraphina had ever seen. Where Silverwood was all sharp edges and cold stone, Darius's territory was built with warmth in mind. The buildings were constructed from pale wood and stone, designed to blend with the snowy landscape, while providing shelter from harsh weather. Everywhere she looked, she saw wolves going about their business, not with fear or downtrodden shoulders, but with confidence and purpose. No one looked like they were invisible here. Everyone seemed to matter. Fane led them straight to the great hall, a massive structure that managed to feel both imposing and welcoming. Inside, fires roared in enormous hearths, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat made Seraphina's stomach clench with sudden hunger. When had she last eaten properly? "Sage," Darius called, and an older woman appeared from a side corridor. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind gray eyes that assessed Seraphina in seconds. "Alpha." Sage's eyebrows rose as she took in Seraphina's appearance. The servant's clothes, the raw fingers, the exhausted paler. "This is Seraphina," Darius said, and something in his voice made Sage's eyes go even wider. "My mate, she's a soul artist. She's been traveling in secret for a week to warn us about an assassination plot. She's exhausted, potentially injured, and she needs immediate care." Sage was already moving before he finished speaking. "Come, dear. Let's get you warm and fed and looked after. Alpha, you can hover. after I've ensured she's not going to collapse. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the overwhelming strangeness of this new place, Seraphina found herself almost smiling at the way Sage spoke to Darius, like he was just another wolf who needed to be managed, not the legendary Alpha King. "I'll be right here," Darius said, catching Seraphina's hand before she could be led away. "I'm not leaving, but please let Sage help you." Seraphina nodded and allowed herself to be guided to a private room. Sage worked with efficient gentleness, checking her over for injuries, bandaging her raw fingers, wrapping her in warm furs by a roaring fire. "Can you drink this, dear?" Sage offered a cup of something that smelled like herbs and honey. Seraphina took it gratefully, sipping the warm liquid. It soothed her throat, not that speaking was an option anyway, and sent warmth through her cold limbs. "The Alpha says you're mute," Sage asked gently. Seraphina nodded. "By choice or by injury?" Seraphina hesitated, then traced in the air. "Trauma." Understanding filled Sage's eyes. "Oh, little one, I'm so sorry, but you should know this pack includes several wolves who can't speak. We've developed a system of hand signs. Would you like to learn?" Seraphina's eyes went wide. Sign language, an actual way to communicate beyond drawing letters in the air. She nodded eagerly. Sage smiled. "Good, I'll teach you. But first, let's get some proper food in you. You're far too thin." Over the next 3 days, Seraphina's world transformed. Sage taught her the hand signs the pack used, an elegant system that allowed full conversations. Seraphina picked it up quickly, her artist's memory for visual patterns serving her well. Within 2 days, she could hold basic conversations. Winter Darius's beta took her shopping for proper clothes, not servants' rags, but beautiful dresses and practical training gear. "You're the Alpha's mate," Winter said firmly when Seraphina tried to. "Refuse the finer items. You'll be Luna after the mating ceremony. You need to look the part." The word Luna made Seraphina's heart race. She wasn't Luna yet. That title only came after the mating ceremony, after the formal bond was complete. Right now, she was just Darius's mate. But the way Winter said it, like it was inevitable and right, made something warm bloom in Seraphina's chest. Darius himself was incredibly patient. He spent hours with her, learning her signs, teaching her about his territory, including her in every discussion about how to handle Ronan's planned attack. "Your drawings gave us everything we need," he explained, during one strategy session. Present were Winter, a massive male called Stone who served as Gamma, and several other high-ranking wolves. "We know the numbers, the timing, the tactics. Now we need to decide how to respond. We could arrest Ronan now," Stone suggested. "Charge him with treason, conspiracy, to commit murder." "What evidence?" Winter countered. "We have drawings in snow that are already melted. Ronan will deny everything." Seraphina's hands moved quickly in the signs she'd learned. "Let the attack happen. Be ready. Catch them in the act." Everyone turned to look at her. Darius translated for those who didn't know signs yet. "Seraphina suggests we let the attack proceed, but be prepared. Catch them red-handed." "It's risky," Winter said, but she was considering it. "If anything goes wrong," Seraphina signed, "it won't. You have all the information. You control the situation, and you need proof that everyone can see. Make it impossible to deny." Fane was watching her with something like pride. "She's right. Ronan will claim any accusation is a political attack. But if we catch 50 rogues and Marcus the Blade attempting assassination at the Peace Festival with Ronan clearly involved, no one can deny that they planned for hours." Seraphina contributed throughout drawing tactical diagrams that, her sole artist gift, brought to glowing three-dimensional life. It was exhausting. Each manifestation drained her energy. But it was so satisfying to finally be heard, to finally have her ideas matter. When the meeting ended and the others filed out, Fane stayed behind. He approached Seraphina carefully, always giving her space to refuse, always making sure she was comfortable. "You're brilliant," he said softly. "The way you see patterns, the way you think strategically. You've been wasted as a servant, Seraphina. You should have been someone's most trusted advisor." Seraphina's hands moved. "I was invisible. That was safer. I know." Fane's jaw clenched. "And I hate that you had to hide who you are just to survive. But you're safe now. You never have to be invisible again." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and perfect. "I want you to know, I'm not claiming you because of the bond. I'm not keeping you because of your gift. I want you because you're brave and brilliant and kind, because you risked everything to save someone you'd never met, because even without words, you have the loudest heart I've ever encountered." Seraphina felt tears welling up. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever seen her like this. Her hands moved shakily. "I can't speak. I don't know if I ever will again." "I don't care," Darius said immediately. "I told you I'm the listening king. I've spent my life learning to hear what isn't spoken. You communicate more clearly in silence than most people do with 1,000 words." Seraphina signed. "You don't mind, Seraphina?" He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice rough with emotion. "My sister was mute. She died when we were young. Rogues attacked her. I couldn't save her. Ever since, I've made it my purpose to hear the voices that others ignore, to protect those who can't speak for themselves. Finding you, meeting you, learning that my mate is someone who turns silence into art and strategy and salvation. It feels like the moon goddess giving me a second chance, a chance to protect someone precious, instead of losing them." Seraphina's tears spilled over. She threw her arms around Darius's neck, holding tight, and felt him wrap her in his strength. For long moments, they just stood there, two people who'd been lonely, finding home in each other. When they finally pulled apart, Seraphina signed, "I want the mating ceremony soon." Then's eyes blazed. "After we deal with Ronan, after you're safe, then I'll mate you properly with our entire pack as witness, and you'll be my Luna." "Is that acceptable?" Seraphina signed. "Perfect." Then she kissed him for the first time. The mate bond sang between them, warm and bright and full of promise. The Peace Festival arrived with clear skies and pristine snow. Seraphina stood with Winter and the other high-ranking females dressed in a gown of silver and white that marked her clearly as Darius's mate. Her silver-white hair was braided with crystals that caught the light. She looked nothing like the servant who'd once scrubbed floors in silence. She looked like someone who mattered around them. The festival was in full swing. Wolves from multiple territories mingled, ate, drank, and celebrated the peace that had worked years to establish. Music played, children ran laughing through the snow, and the atmosphere was joyous. Alpha Ronan was there, of course. He stood with his delegation from Silverwood, his face a mask of false friendship as he spoke with other alphas. Seraphina had seen him search the crowd several times. Was he looking for Marcus? For his rogues? He had no idea they were all already walking into a trap. Darius had positioned the silent guard throughout the festival grounds, hidden but ready. Another 50 warriors waited in the forest, prepared to close the net. Every escape route was covered. Every tactic Marcus planned to use had a counter ready. It was almost beautiful how thoroughly they'd turned Ronan's plan against him. Seraphina felt Darius's presence before she saw him. The clear's throat mate bond let her sense him always now. His location, his emotions, his well-being. He approached her with that characteristic grace, his platinum hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ready?" he asked quietly, signing so only she would understand. Seraphina signed back, "Ready. End this." As if on cue, the attack began. 50 rogues burst from the tree-line, moving in the exact formation Seraphina had drawn. They were coordinated, professional, clearly well-trained. Marcus the Blade led them, his scarred face twisted in a vicious grin as he spotted Darius. What Marcus didn't know was that he was running straight into a trap that had been planned down to the last detail. The silent guard moved first. 30 white wolves exploded from concealment, cutting off the rogues' advance before they could reach the festival proper. It was immediately clear the rogues were outmatched. The silent guard were elite for a reason. Then the other 50 warriors closed in from behind, cutting off retreat. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in minutes. The rogues were surrounded, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Marcus the Blade himself was taken down by Darius personally. 3 quick moves, and the rogue leader was unconscious in the snow. Not a single festival guest was harmed, not a single innocent wolf caught in the crossfire. Perfect execution. But the best part came next. Alpha Ronin. Darius's voice carried across the stunned silence of the festival grounds. He stood over Marcus's unconscious form, his ice-blue eyes fixed on Silverwood's Alpha. "It's interesting. These rogues attacked at exactly the time and place where my mate's drawings predicted they would. They used exactly the tactics she illustrated, and their leader," he prodded Marcus with his boot, "is exactly the wolf she drew." Ronan's face had gone white. "I don't know what you're talking about. There's more," Winter interrupted, stepping forward with a sealed message. "We captured this rogue 2 days ago, skulking near our borders. After some persuasion, he was very talkative. He confirmed that you hired Marcus the Blade to kill Alpha Darius. He provided details of your payments, your meetings, your entire conspiracy," Stone added. "We also have testimony from 3 Silverwood servants who witnessed your planning sessions. It seems you weren't as careful as you thought about who was listening." Seraphina stepped forward then, and every eye turned to her. She was clearly marked as Darius's mate, clearly someone important. Ronan's eyes widened as he recognized her, the silent servant who'd scrubbed his floors, who he'd never looked at twice. She pulled out her journal and held it up, open to pages of detailed drawings, maps of Ronan's conspiracy, portraits of Marcus, timelines of meetings, everything she'd witnessed over weeks of being invisible. "My mate is a soul artist," Darius said, his voice hard as steel. "She witnessed your entire conspiracy and recorded it. She risked her life for a week to warn me, and because of her courage, your attempt to murder me and seize my territory has failed completely." He gestured, and Stone brought forward chains. "Alpha Ronin of the Silverwood Pack. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, hiring rogues to attack a peace festival, and treason against the Northern Territories Alliance." Ronan's face twisted with rage as the chains were fastened. "That mute little servant. She's the one who ruined everything. I'll kill her." Alphane moved faster than thought, his hand closing around Ronan's throat. His voice was deadly quiet. "She's not a servant. She's my mate. She'll be my Luna, and if you ever threaten her again, I'll tear you apart personally. Am I clear?" Ronan could only gurgle a response as guards dragged him away. The rest of the festival was subdued after that, but the mood was more relief than fear. Darius had protected them all. The conspiracy had been exposed. The rogues were captured. Peace was preserved. As the sun set, Darius found Seraphina standing at the edge of the festival grounds, looking out over the snowy landscape. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You saved my life," he murmured. "Saved my pack. Saved this entire alliance. You're a hero, Seraphina." Her hands moved. "I'm just someone who drew pictures." "No." Darius turned her to face him. "You're someone who saw injustice and refused to accept it. Someone who took enormous risks to protect a stranger. Someone who turned silence into the loudest warning anyone's ever heard. You're extraordinary." He dropped to one knee in the snow, taking her hands in his. "I know we already have the mate bond. I know the moon goddess chose us for each other, but I want to choose you too. Seraphina, will you let me complete the mating ceremony? Will you be my Luna, my partner, my equal in all things? Will you help me build a territory where everyone's voice, spoken or silent, matters?" Seraphina was crying as she nodded yes. She pulled him up and kissed him, the mate bond singing between them with pure joy. When they broke apart, she signed, "I want the ceremony tomorrow." Fane laughed bright and happy. "Tomorrow? Then I'll marry you tomorrow and spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved and valued you are." The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, with the entire pack in attendance. Seraphina wore white and silver with her silver hair flowing loose down her back. Sage had woven crystals and moonflowers into the strands until she glowed like living artwork. Darius wore traditional ceremonial furs, his platinum hair braided in the old way. He looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful and regal and strong. But the way he looked at Seraphina like she was the only person in the world who mattered, that was what made her heart soar. Sage performed the ceremony, speaking the ancient words that would bind them formally in the eyes of the pack and the moon goddess. When it came time for the marking, Darius cradled Seraphina's face gently. "I love you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I love your courage, your kindness, your brilliant mind. I love the way you see the world and translate it into art. I love that you chose to be brave when staying silent would have been safer. I love everything about you, Seraphina, and I'll spend my life making sure you never doubt it." Seraphina's hands moved in response, signing words the entire pack could now understand. "I love you. You heard me when no one else did. You made me visible when I'd spent years hidden. You gave me a voice louder than words. You're my home." When Darius marked her neck, claiming her as his mate and Luna, before the moon goddess, something extraordinary happened. Seraphina's soul artist gift flared with the power of the completed bond, and suddenly the entire clearing was filled with glowing images. Drawings lifted from her memory and became real. Her parents smiling and proud. Her grandmother, gentle and loving, the scared 6-year-old Seraphina had been, and the strong woman she'd become. Darius and the 30 white wolves who'd surrounded her that dawn. The drawings in the snow that had saved his life. Every important moment of her journey rendered in silver light floating around them like a gallery of her soul. The pack gasped in wonder. This was soul artist magic at its finest. Truth made visible, emotion made real, silence given form. When the images finally faded, Seraphina turned to face the pack. Her pack now her home, and then something even more extraordinary happened. She opened her mouth and spoke her first word in 17 years. "Mine." Her voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but in the stunned silence, everyone heard it. Darius's eyes went wide with wonder and joy. Seraphina's hands moved to clarify what she meant. This pack, this home, this life, this love, all mine, and I'm never invisible again. The pack erupted in celebration, howls echoing through the night. Darius pulled Seraphina into his arms, holding her tight while she shook with the enormity of what she'd done. She'd spoken, not because the mate bond magically healed her trauma, not because she was fixed or cured, but because she'd finally felt safe enough, valued enough, loved enough to choose her voice. "You don't have to speak again if you don't want to," Darius murmured against her hair. "I love you either way," Seraphina signed. "I know, but maybe sometimes I will when I have something important to say. Everything you say is important, insisted, spoken, or signed, or drawn, or painted. Every form of communication you choose is precious." 5 years later, Seraphina sat in her studio, a beautiful room in the great hall that had designed specifically for her art. Sunlight streamed through enormous windows, illuminating the paintings and drawings that covered every wall. She was working on a portrait when 3-year-old twin voices called from the doorway. "Mama, Mama, watch." Seraphina turned to see her son and daughter running into the room. Eric had his father's platinum hair and ice-blue eyes. Lisa had Seraphina's silver-white hair and a quieter demeanor. Both of them were clutching pieces of charcoal. "Look what I drew." Eric thrust a paper toward her, a somewhat lopsided wolf that was clearly meant to be his father. Lisa showed her drawing more shilly, a perfect rendering of a flower, far too detailed for a 3-year-old. As Seraphina watched, her daughter's drawing began to glow with soft silver light. The flower lifted from the page, became real for just a moment, before fading. Lisa was a soul artist, too. Seraphina knelt and pulled both her children into her arms, signing with one hand while speaking softly. She still preferred signs most of the time, but used her voice for important moments. "They're beautiful, both perfect. When I grow up, I'm going to be in the silent guard like Uncle Stone," Eric declared. Lisa signed quietly. "I want to paint like you, Mama. You can be whatever you want," Seraphina assured them, "as long as you're kind and brave." Darius appeared in the doorway, their 6-month-old son, Asher, sleeping against his chest. "Are they bothering you?" Seraphina signed with a smile. "Never. They're perfect." She stood, moving to her mate's side. Darius wrapped his free arm around her, and they watched their twins run off to play. Through the window, Seraphina could see the northern white peaks spread out before them. Prosperous, peaceful, thriving. She'd done that. Her warnings had saved not just Darius, but this entire territory. Her gifts, both her art and her strategic mind, had helped shape policies, diffuse conflicts, build alliances. She'd established an art school in the territory for children who struggled with traditional communication, children who were mute, deaf, or simply found words difficult learned to express themselves through drawing, painting, sculpture. Several of them had manifested rare gifts when given the freedom to communicate in their own way. The northern White Peaks had become known as a place where everyone's voice mattered, spoken, signed, drawn, or simply felt. A place where being different wasn't a weakness, but a strength. "What are you thinking?" they asked, nuzzling her hair. Seraphina signed. About that scared servant who drew pictures in the snow, about how far she's come. She became a hero. Darius said, "Became a Luna, became the mother of my children and the heart of my territory, became the most important person in my world." Seraphina signed. "She became visible, that's all she, ever wanted. You're more than visible, Darius insisted. You're radiant, you're powerful, you're loved by an entire pack, you're Seraphina signed, yours. Then she spoke the word aloud too, yours. Darius kissed her softly, and I'm yours always. Years later, when young wolves would come to Luna Seraphina, feeling lost or voiceless, unable to express who they were or what they needed, she'd smile and show them her earliest drawings, the ones from that week when she'd risked everything to warn a king she'd never met. I was invisible once, she'd sign, her voice sometimes adding soft words for emphasis. I was silent and scared and alone. I thought my voice didn't matter because I couldn't speak, but I was wrong. She'd show them her studio filled with artwork that had literally changed the territory, paintings that had resolved conflicts, drawings that had designed new buildings, sculptures that had inspired new laws. Communication isn't about sound, she'd tell them. It's about connection, about truth, about having something to say and finding a way to say it. Whether that's words or signs or art or music or simply presence, your voice matters. You just have to find the right way to share it. The moon goddess gives us gifts, she'd say, gesturing to the territory beyond the windows, not to make us powerful, but to help us connect, to help us serve, to help us save each other. My gift, let me warn a king, let me save lives, let me build a family and a home. But the gift wasn't what mattered. What mattered was having something important to say and finding the courage to say it. She'd look at the young wolf with absolute certainty and sign, "You have important things to say. Find your way to say them and know that here in this territory, every voice is heard, even the silent ones, especially the silent ones. Because sometimes the quietest voices have the most important messages. Sometimes a drawing in the snow can save a kingdom. Sometimes the invisible ones are actually the most powerful. You just have to be brave enough to be seen. And every time without fail, the young wolves would leave feeling heard, valued, and hopeful. Because Luna Seraphina, the mute Omega, who'd drawn warnings in the snow and became a queen, had shown them that every voice mattered, even the silent ones, especially the silent ones. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romance tales, alpha kings, rejected mates, and powerful Omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of Seraphina and Darius's story, and what kind of werewolf stories you'd like to see next. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this. Thank you for reading, and I'll see you in the next